White Kukwaitip, Kanahus request. My name is Kanahus. It means red woman in Tanaka. I'm from both the Secwepemc and the Tanaka nations in so-called British Columbia. My land that living in right now, Secwepemc Uluk, is 180,000 square kilometers of land. We've never signed treaty with Great Britain, Canada, nor British Columbia, and so our land remains unceded and unsurrendered. Our land, Secwepemc Uluk, our nation, is one of the biggest Indigenous nations in so-called British Columbia. Right now, first let me just introduce my family. My father, my late father, Arthur Manuel, was an Indigenous leader of our people, and my late grandfather, Dr. Grand Chief George Manuel, was an international leader for Indigenous rights. And he founded the organization called the World Council of Indigenous Peoples. And it's with the spirit of his organizing that I stand here today as the dream of the Allied Tribes and this World Council of Indigenous Peoples to bring our people together for our common goals of land, protection of land, and the self-determination of our people. Two things, very simple: land and self-determination for our people, because it's when we have full control and territorial authority over our lands, when we're able to manage our lands and make decisions about the lands and the so-called resources, that we will be the mighty, powerful nations that we once were. And right now, I believe what the other speakers were saying, that we're really in a time that needs our attention. We need to really put our personal effort into defense of our homelands. And myself and my community and my families have been doing this for generations in defense of our lands. My twin sister, Mayuk Belki, Weasel Woman, she's actually doing house arrest jail time right now for land defense against the Trans Mountain Pipeline, a pipeline coming from the Alberta tar sands from here, this area that they want to sacrifice to mine bitumen, some of the dirtiest crude oil in the world. And I know people from here know this industry all too well and the impacts that it has on their lives, on their health. And if you add up all the Indian reserves in so-called Canada, it will equal 0.2% of land. So us Indigenous peoples here in so-called Canada are only living on 0.2% of our land, which is very small, not even 1%. And so we know the impacts that that has on our lives, because our economy is out there, and the other 99.8% that Canada continues to control, and that's all the resources, all the wealth, all this oil and gas and minerals that are being extracted from our earth, and it's impacting us. Through my years of organizing in our community, we faced off with many different industries, including the ski resort industry in 2001 that wanted to clear-cut 2 entire more mountains on top of the one that they already had to build a ski resort. This would be using recycled sewage waste to make snow, similar to Arizona, what they were trying to do there. And we stood up and we fought back. They got court injunctions against us, which really pretty well meant automatic jail time if you stood up to protest it. And we had around 75 arrests, and our elders led the way on that one. And the young people formed Native Youth Movement in our community, and they stood up as well. And we had 75 arrests in just a season of a ski season. And just seeing how the RCMP came in and the Crown came in to arrest our elders and to violate them and be violent with them and bring them off to jail and make them go through this court process and make them go to probation officer, every couple of weeks, or go sign in at the police station. More young people began to stand up. and our elders led the way on that time. We stood up also against the 2010 Winter Olympics, which would mean more mountains clear-cutted for the 2010 ski runs for the Winter Olympics. And then in 2014, we had one of the world's largest mine tailings disaster happen in Likely, in our lake called Yucnasenjaimetqua. It's the deepest glacier-fed lake in the world, as we come from the mountains and we come from glaciers. And it dumped billions of gallons of toxic mine waste into our lake. And this was right during our salmon spawning season. For those that don't know, the salmon are on a 4-year cycle, so they come up into the interior to lay their eggs and spawn, and then they spend a year in the local lakes until they venture out into the open ocean. And they go out into the open ocean as far up as Alaska, all down Washington State. That's the salmon. And then they come back in the 4th year to the same creek that they were born in, and they know by the DNA. But with this Mount Poly mine disaster, it released copper into the natural streams, and the copper is how the salmon navigate through the waters, and so it affected the salmon on that year. And a lot of natives chose to fast from salmon after that Mount Poly mine disaster because they didn't want to touch the salmon. The women were crying at their fishing spots because they wanted to fish, but we didn't know what those billions of gallons of toxic mine waste was going to do for our food source. We come from the mountains. There's 4 major rivers that form in our headwaters in the glaciers: the Fraser, the Thompson, the Columbia, which is dammed now, and even the Athabasca River forms in the headwaters and it flows north. So we have 4 major rivers, and it's really important for us in our rights and our responsibilities to protect that land. And because we come from this massive amount of water, we found ourselves in fights way high in the glacier by Tum Tum and the Upper Adams with Imperial Metals Mine again, trying to mine lead and zinc into the mountains. And so we were successful in stopping them for a point, but there's still exploratory drilling up in our sacred headwaters and our glaciers up in Tum Tum. Chka, they call it, our people. The Indian Reserve System and the Indian Act system, where the Indian Reserves come out of, is some of the most destructive laws against our people because it forced us off of our territory onto little tiny Indian reserves. And like I said, our economy is out there, and we need to talk about our indigenous economies. We had, prior to white man, prior to colonization, we had a thriving economy amongst us even, natives all the way here. And we have this pipeline now that connects us to the land up here, because that pipeline travels 1,152 kilometers through my homelands. It cuts through on its way to Tsleil-Waututh territory, Musqueam and Squamish out near Vancouver at the Westridge Marine Terminal. So all the way from the Edmonton terminal of Trans Mountain Pipeline, it travels all the way to Westridge Marine Terminal, 890,000 barrels of bitumen per day that are now filling super tankers. These are big Afromax tankers that are en route to refineries down in California and to the Bay Area of California, Richmond, California. And these oil refineries have already been there refining oil, but this is a massive push, will increase 700 times the amount that's going on these tankers through the nations of the Pacific Northwest, down north of, or south, in between Vancouver Island and Washington State, Orca Islands, San Juan Islands, out to the macaw, to the whale hunters, and then down south through the Washington, Oregon, and California coast that this tankers are threatening. And so in a way to organize the people, for us, we started to build tiny houses on wheels to go and occupy our territories off Indian Reserve and confront the oil industry with the pipeline coming through our land. And right now we have 7 tiny houses on wheels that we deployed at Blue River. It's a halfway point between Edmonton and Vancouver. And this little town, a white settler town of Blue River, has maybe 150 or so residents. But we moved our tiny houses up there to confront an industrial worker camp, a man camp, that they wanted to bring in 1,500 pipeline workers right there by the little tiny house village that we had set up. And so they came and went. We battled those pipeline workers for years and years as we built up our own little tiny house warrior village there in Blue River. And our nation is big. It goes up to Jasper House. There's Secwepemc people that were relocated from Jasper House down more south into our territory. So I didn't realize how close we are and how we border with the nations here. And there's political, I'm sure, political allyship and ties that we've had in the past that we need to rekindle as we build ourselves up politically with a strong voice for us as allied tribes and nations together. My father, he formed an organization called the Indigenous Network on Economies and Trade, and he was challenging the Canadian government that way with this organization and these corporations because they need money to build up this industry out in our land. And he was saying that these companies and these governments don't have title. They don't have title to the land. It's actually us, Indigenous peoples, that hold title to our lands. And when we stand up, the government will say, okay, yeah, you could go pick berries there, you could go hunt there, but it's not claim to the land, the title itself out there on our territory. So my grandfather in his organizing days was always making sure we said the title to the land, the actual ownership over our territories, the territorial authority to make the decisions about our lands. And that comes not from Chief and Council, that was invented by Indian Act and the federal government. It's actually we as the people collectively in our roles as mothers, as hunters, as fishermen and berry pickers, and our people who are out there practicing our way of life. We are the collective title holders and rights holders to our land. And with that, we have major responsibility and educating the young people to speak our languages, even land defense. We have young warriors out there training, on the ground to be fit and to be able to maneuver out on our land when threats against us come. And we're going to have to teach, the young ones and up all these skills. And before, in the past, my grandfather, when he would travel, he would bring a young man or a young woman, or back then it was a young man that would travel with him. He was 16 years old. He went to Chiapas during the massacres to the Mayan, when they were fleeing the massacres. They were in the border there, and he went there. He went to go meet with the top guerrillas that were fighting back. He found them. They were under the guise of raising all the chickens. After days, he went and he found who's the leaders. He went to Chile during the Pinochet era. He went all to these hot spots all around the world organizing Indigenous peoples. And so growing up and learning that and having to get on the mic when I was the shyest person as a young girl growing up, but then knowing that we have a legacy that we have to continue on as Indigenous peoples. Our grandparents stayed alive, kept our family lineage alive for us to be here today. And it's powerful to see all of us survivors of this genocide that's still happening today in Canada and around the world. And the alliance doesn't stop just here, because it's everywhere, like our brother said from Peru. Our brother said from Peru, it's in Palestine. You know, we stand with the Palestinian, we stand with every indigenous people. I stand with the Burkina Faso as they're kicking out the colonizers out of their countries in Africa. And we gotta watch what they're doing over there in Africa. They're kicking the colonizers out. And we have to look at the same thing. How are we gonna do that? What happens, my dad would always say, what happens if they give the land back today? How are you going to manage it? You need to have self-determination plans to learn how to say how you're gonna manage it, because you know some other brown skin is gonna go in and say, I know how to run it, and they're gonna fit right into the province and the Ministry of Mines, and they're gonna fit right into what they wanna continue to do to our lands. So we really do have to get organized, and just my gratitude to Paula and to Chief Orville Lookenhorst for continuing this World Peace and Prayer, to bring us all together, because these are really important for us to have, and to open our heart and our minds, our eyes up to what's happening. We're so connected, even more than we know, and our prayers are powerful, and they're connected right here, with this altar, with this going global around the world right now. So I just want to, say thank you for everybody for their time and for listening, and I'll be here throughout the rest of the time and be able to continue the conversation with anybody. I know people were wanting a Tiny House Warrior shirt, but I only have one, so maybe we can do a trade. And I also do tattoo work, and I do birth work, but the birth work was really so I could deliver my own babies, and the tattoo work was so I could give my kids coming of age tattoos when they went for their echka and woman in manhood ceremonies. So my decolonization efforts never end. And I brought my tattoo stuff. I know a couple people wanted tattoo too. And but I'll leave it there, and thank you, Cook's Jam, everybody.